Hi, welcome to the What's Appening podcast. I'm your host, Paul Murphy. This season, we're interviewing GPT creators. What's Appening is brought to you by 3Advance, with a startup development team that doesn't just prompt LLMs, we program them. And today, our very special guest is Gavin McMahen. Gavin is on the board of directors and he's treasurer at Digital Irish. I'll talk a little bit about that. Gavin is a techie, I would call him, a techie at heart, although his experience spans across banking and a hell of a lot of other things. His GPT is a personal interest to me, and we'll get into that a little bit later because I've gone through the process. I know the value of it. But Gavin, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you here.
Thanks, Paul. Delighted to be here.
So Gavin, you and I know each other from Digital Irish. I think we should definitely start there. If you want to talk a little bit about your journey, obviously you're another Irishman. I should probably point that out. Tell me a little bit about your journey, I guess, over here to the United States, as well as how that tied in with Digital Irish and what you're doing over there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my personal journey is very much intertwined with Digital Irish and what Digital Irish does. So I've moved to the US 10 years ago. And when I did so, I was incredibly naive to think it would all be okay. Moved over here with, no network to speak of or very few friends and family over here. And so I just coincidentally happened to see a tweet which was retweeted by the Irish consulate that was talking about this group called New York Digital Irish. And so to cut a very long story short, I went along to the first event, was introduced to some incredible people who over the series of a couple of weeks made incredible introductions for me within the network to find a job. And so that's basically how I got my start in the US. And so I always thought that was a fantastic thing that happened for me. How do we continue to pass it along? Which, that's why I got involved in Digital Irish to begin with then as well.
Yeah. So you came over here without a job. Did you come over here traveling or just experimenting, trying to see what's happening over here first? Or how did you?
No, you're right. So, yeah, my wife is American. So I did, basically the 90-Day Fiancé without the camera crew and the TV show behind me.
Yeah, and my story is not dissimilar. I showed up in 2004. I had 3 months to find a job, and my goal was, again, J1 based. I had done the research and realized that if I could find an employer, I could find somebody to sponsor this J1 that I knew all about, that was my ticket in the door. If I could convince someone to sponsor that J1, I wrote my own training program for that J1. That's another story. So I know full well what this experience is about.
Now you can use a GPT to write the training program for you, probably.
Well, that's what we got here. So lead in from your, tell me more about the Digital Irish community right now and your work over the past few years and where that's going.
Yeah, so Digital Irish originally started to support Irish entrepreneurs on their journey to scale their companies in the US. And that arose from finding companies that would come over and generally have the same issues in, finding a network, finding people that could help on that journey. And so what spun up from that was the things that we do, which are kind of innovation talks. We do community events where we get people together. We've started to build more online digital tools to bring the network together too. As you're well aware, we have the Digital Irish Venture Fund because we were routinely asked for introductions to people on the venture capital side. And so we thought there's an opportunity there to help more in finding access to capital. But then something that's also pretty close to my heart is at our networking events, we would routinely have J1s that would come up and say, hey, I'm here on the J1 graduate visa, typically. I need to find a job, and I need to find a job, by next week, I'm going home.
I've been there. It's funny. So my first interaction with Digital Irish, my first event that I headed up to New York to see was Nigel from FanDuel telling excellence. It was an incredible event because I have some experience in the sports tech and the fantasy world specifically. So when I heard he was speaking, I was straight up there, and he's from 30 miles away from where I grew up in Enniskillen. And so it was fascinating hearing his story, which is a roller coaster in itself. But that opened the door up to me to learn what's going on in New York and hopefully I could help spread that to DC and other places. And even now we've got a few more members down here that are getting more vocal and more active, which is awesome.
Well, I think, Paul, you've touched on the crux of what we try to embrace, which is that we have incredible Irish success stories, not just in tech, but throughout every industry. And you can see that from, the senior positions that people hold, the professional success, and perhaps like most importantly, the way people are very generous with their time. It's not a case of, pull up the ladder behind them. People like Nigel who've come to our events, who have spoken and shared how, they've found the path to success and helping the entrepreneurs or people on their professional journey behind them as well. So I think that's probably the really important thing that we try to embrace and bring together.
Yeah, totally. I don't know. That's maybe a part of an Irish thing as well. It's like, it's the helping each other out. And as an entrepreneur, that's one of the biggest assets someone will have as a connector or an entrepreneur is to help other people first. Like the more you help people, the more they'll help you. And it's if it's coming from a natural place, it's not even karma. It's just, it's how you want to live your life. And suddenly you get a knock on the door and someone's connecting you or helping you out later. And there's no expectation of it, but it just seems to be this flywheel that's incredible. And
absolutely,
something that I'm proud of myself to be able to help people, but as excited when someone helped me through whatever times I'm having. But anyway, Gavin, tell me a little bit. So recently, you made the J1 resume bot. Tell me about that and how that connects to Digital Irish or whatever is behind the scenes there, because there's usually a reason, and sometimes there's a future version of a GPT, which is why I'm most interested in GPTs.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, when we would get a lot of J1s that come along to our events, the questions and the ask for help and support was pretty consistent from person to person in terms of what that request would be. And so by and large, I would see that the first issue was almost always the resume. Yeah, that it wasn't formatted, or first of all, it was called a CV. CVs generally aren't acceptable in the US, particularly for your first role out of college. So how do you structure a resume? And then how do you make sure that resume is one page? I've gotten resumes that are up to 9 pages. Yeah. I don't expect that you're going to have 9 pages worth of experience we're talking about straight out of college. So how do we kind of tweak that and make sure that J1s that are here are representing themselves in the most appropriate way, and competing, frankly, with American students, right? So they're kind of like automatically at a disadvantage because, like anyone else that moves over here, you don't have a network.
Yes.
And trying to find the right opportunities. We don't want the resume to be the part that's holding you back, at least initially.
Yeah.
Digital Irish, as you know. Oh, yeah, sorry.
It's fascinating, Gavin, because just last week I interviewed Noble Apperson, who is he works with underserved communities, and he's providing mentoring. He created a mentoring GPT to match a resume, give advice around a resume and against and not just the resume, but the job application, and match that against a job posting. And it's funny how these, and for me, my mission at 3 Advance, and it's right 3 Advance and everything we do is about empowering those that are not, that are not born with a silver spoon. Either they're immigrants that don't have any connections or know anybody, as you sort of mentioned,
right?
Or they're from underserved backgrounds, or communities that are niche communities that that breed unexpected founders, but really, really strong founders. So it's funny how this thread is like going through that. A lot of people who are creating GPTs are actually creating them to help certain communities. Right. That's what I love about this. And like you say, it's like the Irish background gives us one of probably the greatest asset that we have in coming to America. And I fully believe, like, no matter what background that you come from, you use whatever tool you've got. You use whatever it is. So, this is what a lot of people in America, they went to Notre Dame or they went to LSU, and they have that community. Or if you're an immigrant, you certainly don't. But we do have this Irish connection. So it's always, what is it that you have, and how can you help others that have that same asset, but also that the inaccessibility to other things.
And that's fantastic. And that's what I'm kind of realizing as I learn more about these other GPT creators that you've featured, is that it's great for kind of like these edge cases, right? So how to craft a US resume seems like a pretty straightforward thing, but how to translate an Irish resume to a US resume, there's quite subtle but distinct differences, right?
Yes.
Paper size is different to begin with.
Right, which is a major thing. Like, you don't even think about that or either side.
Exactly, but I can tell a bot to make sure to cover that part, which is pretty important, right?
That's so funny. That's so funny. So how have you been testing this yourself lately? Have you given it to anyone that's made any use out of it? How far through the journey have you got with?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to think about like my journey with this J1 resume bot. Where did it start from? It started from the sheer volume of emails and LinkedIn messages that I get from J1s asking for help. And I would love nothing more than to dedicate time to be able to help every single one of them. But fortunately or unfortunately, I have a full-time day job as well that keeps me pretty busy. And so, again, thinking about what knowledge do I have that I can share that obviously I've tried in terms of a blog post and pointing people there. I would say this is another tool in the arsenal about how do we deploy something that is specific and relevant to these people's needs, and to be able to do it at a way that efficient for me and how I use my time, but also somewhat scalable as well, right? It's clearly inefficient for me to have one-on-one conversations with everyone. How can I deploy something that creates maybe a first line filter so that if someone reaches out to me, I can say, talk to the bot, click on this link, then come back to me. Then I'll know you're perhaps more prepared. So that's kind of where I've started, is trying to push this out to, again, just be more responsive and let people know that I want to be engaged and I want to be helpful, obviously with that restriction about my own time then as well. But, helping them do their own work and prepare themselves for engaging with someone who will then perhaps dedicate some time to get more into the specifics about how they can help too. So this is, it's very early stage for me. I would like to incorporate it as part of, more of a broader program that we want to do to help J1s. This to me seems like a good start to be a little bit more efficient, to use my time more efficiently, but to address the needs of the broader community. Because obviously there's specific times of the year where, it's not all spaced out, right? If I was getting 10 a month, that might be achievable. But when it's 100 in the space of like 3 weeks, that becomes a little bit more difficult to manage.
Yeah. And Gavin, I want to get into a little bit as well, is like, well, it's a GPT right now, does it have potential to be anything else? And like, whether it's a product or a feature and I want to tie that in with some of your other experience, because like one of the threads we got through some interviewing people on the podcast is, the GPT, ultimately the GPT creator interface is a low-code tool. And I know you have used tons of other low-code. You're big on, I know how much you love Airtable. I know you're all over Zapier. And this is obviously definitely a common theme for those who are making GPTs, is this level of automation. But have you integrated parts of this with any other automated, connecting to anything else? Or where do you think this bot may go as part of like a lot larger endeavor?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was listening to the interview you did with Tylen Miller before that as well, and about the integration piece with things like Zapier and Airtable. So, and first of all, what an incredible creator. 3,000 GPTs. That wasn't at all intimidating to me before I came on here with my one bot. In truth, I'm not quite sure. I think in many respects, you still kind of need the human connectedness, the one-on-one in some respect with J1s, but it's how do you help them help themselves so that they're more prepared by the time you do get to engage one-on-one as well. I wouldn't say it's entirely integrated, but trying to feed people into an Airtable that we can then share with potential employers. The idea would be that it becomes kind of a self-service portal. And so you come on, you get some help, you can log your information. If you want that to be shared with potential employers, we will do our best to do that through things like Airtable. I mean, it's so easy to throw up a website and embed an Airtable view within it, and that can live on pretty easily, right? So we did something similar on that site called irishcalendar.com.
That's right.
We're trying to collate Irish events in and around New York City, and hopefully more broadly from there. But again, that's just a WordPress website with an Airtable embed, and it works great. And I built it within a couple of hours, and is a really valuable project for the community. So hoping we can do more on the J1 side then as well. Using some of these kind of like automated tools.
Yeah, I feel like we've got this far into the podcast, and I probably should explain what a J1 is. I don't anyone who's come here as an immigrant or even has come over here, whether it's for school or whatever else. The J1, I'm going to let you explain because my version of it is probably 20 years old and very inaccurate. So, Gavin, explain what a J1 actually is for those of us those of the people who've got this far and are still wondering, what is this all about?
Yeah. So maybe first of all, a caveat, I never did a J1 myself.
Yeah.
So my understanding is entirely from my involvement with J1s. But there are a couple of different versions. There's a summer work visa, which is a 3-month development visa. And then there's the one that I tend to focus on the most, which is the J1 graduate visa, which can be up 12 to 18 months for a recent grad out of an Irish university to come and work in the US. And the idea is it's a professional development visa. You come to the US, you get some exposure, and then you take that learning back to Ireland afterwards.
Yeah.
And so it's a wonderful initiative between Ireland and the US. There's other countries that do J1s as well, but specifically we get the relationship between Ireland and the US is profound.
Yeah.
And so you see a lot of J1s that come to places like Boston and New York and the West Coast as well. So that's
right. That's good. So you'll find some folks on J1s that are working in a bar for a summer or selling ice creams on the pier in Jersey somewhere. Yeah. Or then you have the J1s who are coming for professional training that stick around. That one's a little bit longer. That stick around for like 12 to 18 months. And as I say, like I personally came over here in a J1 myself, knowing that that's what I wanted. I wanted to have an experience. I wanted to learn. And at the time, certainly in the industry that we're in, probably similar now, a lot of people did not know what a J1 is on the American side. But as soon as I could explain the benefit, it was an incredible benefit. I was coming over here to spend part of my time learning, but also be able to actually make an impact within a business, within a company.
Yeah.
And then was it that 18?
And I think, I was just going to say, Paul, you touched on a really important part there as well, which is the opportunity for employers, which is to get a great Irish grad straight out of school who's fresh and enthusiastic. And the requirements on the employer are minimal in comparison to something like a H-1B or any of the other types of visas that are out there. The requirements on the employer are pretty small. I'm not going to advise anyone on the actual requirements. I'll leave that to the legal professionals. But it is a really important part. The requirements on the employer are pretty minute.
Yeah, well, it gave me a great experience. I came over here and I worked for a startup as soon as I arrived, and I was certainly a fish out of water. Yeah, arriving in the United States, and suddenly I'm in startup land, and it was a crazy experience, but so much value in the space of the short time I was there, and that sort of set me up for a long-term career. I think whenever you get a J1, you are not allowed to come over here with the intention of staying, but I think most people who come over here from Ireland are not restricted from, if they have an opportunity and they move on to a whatever kind of like an H-1B or anything afterwards, that is an option that's open later.
Yes, indeed. But I mean, and like great success story in your case. We also see I love to hear these stories about people that have come to the US and they've gotten out of Ireland for a while. They've just developed a greater sense about the world and the opportunities that are out there. And then they're able to take that international learning and bring it back to Ireland. That, to me, is so important for the Irish economy as well. So that's a real benefit to the program that I want to continue to foster and develop because, again, I'm from Ireland. It's a country that raised me and educated me for 25 plus years. I want to continue to see the Irish economy grow and develop. I think the J1 program is a great way of doing that.
Yeah, I think that's almost everyone from an Irish background. I'm sure other communities and countries as well. They want to support others behind. Again, we got so much from our education in Ireland and from our families and community, and absolutely want to send it back. And that's ultimately what the Digital Irish community is all about. And even mentioned the Digital Irish Venture Fund, which I'm obviously a member of as well. The whole point of that is to provide funding for Irish startups that have grown up in Ireland but want to move to the United States and expand their operations. And Gavin, with that in mind, I want to shift gears slightly towards talk more about Digital Irish and specifically the event that's happening in October. that is sort of like overlaps with the Digital Irish Venture Fund.
Yeah.
Also, I'll hand you the mic and talk about what's happening in October.
So in 2023, we decided to do kind of a 3-day go-to-market a series of events in New York City. And we called it Irish Startup Week. And surprisingly, first of all, the domain was available. So I grabbed that.
Those domains.
Yeah. When they're available, it's fantastic. Because really what we had seen, again, through the community events we do throughout the year, a lot of the questions are pretty similar. And so we tried to figure out, like, is there a way we can do this in a condensed version where we can get some of those really successful senior Irish entrepreneurs and business professionals, get them in a room and share their advice over 2.5, 3 days. And so that's what we did. And we did it in 2023. We put it out there that we were accepting applications for startups that were on the cusp or perhaps in the early stages of expanding to the US. And so we had 23 incredible companies that came, that learned from the success of other companies that and other professionals that have done it, but also introduced them to kind of the Irish New York ecosystem, who the players were, who investors were, put them in front of a room of investors, and to accelerate their US journey. So based on the success of 2023, which, again, it was a volunteer effort and we all kind of did last minute and probably shouldn't have been as successful as it was. We're deciding to do it again for 2024. The good news is we have more lead time organized at this time. So applications are currently open. The criteria is, like I said, to be a company that's on the cusp of expanding to the US, or perhaps earlier in your journey of expanding to the US. We want to put you in front of a network of professionals that have done it or can advise on how to do it to accelerate that journey. But I will caveat it all by saying it is a volunteer effort. And so, obviously put a lot of the onus on the startups themselves to coordinate their own meetings and ensure that the journey is successful for you too. This is not intended to be a kind of a startup holiday. This will be very specific, very focused. 2 days 2.5 days of events this year. Last year we did it from like 9 p.m. to 6 p.m. And it was great. The content was amazing, but people were exhausted by the afternoon. So we're structuring it more this year to be 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And that's to allow the startups to coordinate their meetings, to have breakfast meetings, to have evening meetings, afternoon meetings. And then we'll have something in the evenings too. So really excited to work on it again this year. So we've had an incredible amount of signups that we're excited to see make the journey over to the US.
I'm really excited about it. I came to the United States in 2004. And as I say, when I had left Ireland, it did, like, entrepreneur was almost a dirty word. It wasn't a dirty word, but it was certainly less activity. It was like, even the word startup was probably not even in the lexicon at that point. And I'd come to America and it was like, I was mind blown by the activity, the enthusiasm, the free flowing or more free flowing money and funds. But since then, and this is happening, I don't think this is unique to Ireland. I think it's happening in many other cities around the world that were not as active and now are booming. But going back to Ireland right now, and you're seeing the communities in the north and the south and it's incredible. The difference is astounding. There's like a vibrant, busy, active, exciting, and super talented population. We were always educated, but recently we're doing shit now. Like we're really making things happen, and it's as exciting and a hotbed for entrepreneurial activity as anywhere in the United States. It's fantastic.
And I mean, it's an entire ecosystem that's supporting startups there now as well, right? Obviously, you've got the important work that Enterprise Ireland does as, I think I'm correct in saying this, biggest seed stage investor in the world, which is also a huge contributor to the Irish Exchequer, right? So we're investing in good startups that are having success stories, but seeing more and more kind of the tech transfer offices being spun up out of the universities as well. So it's a dedicated effort within the country, and that's really exciting to me to see.
There's probably few areas outside of San Francisco, outside of the Bay Area, that is so many top tier tech company, employees and people coming out in Ireland. Like we've got all of the European bases for these huge, successful American companies, and they're the next generation of entrepreneur as well, like that. And that's like outside of the Bay Area, like where would you have that amount of concentrated experience? It's incredible.
Absolutely.
So Gavin, I want to just put a shout out, pass it back to you, and just sort of say, if anyone wants to get involved in any of the Digital Irish events or Digital Irish Startup Week, anything else, do you want to give some information about that?
Oh, sure. So I would highly recommend, if you want to check us out and see what we do, go to digitalirish.com. We've all our information on there, or always welcome to reach out to me. My email address is hello@digitalirish.com.
Awesome. And then I need to give a shout out to Dave Byrne, because he has the Digital Irish podcast. So if you're listening to this, make sure you scoot on over and take a listen to Dave's podcast as well. Dave's actually in Washington, D.C. or in this area along with me, which he moved to recently. And it's great to get that community sort of starting to bloom over here in this part of the country too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm delighted you gave Dave a shout out, because he's doing an incredible job on the podcast with featuring the success of Irish professionals over here. So I appreciate the shout out to Dave there as well.
Well, Gavin, we're about to wrap up. Before we do you have any questions for me, or is there anything I can answer, anything I haven't covered yet?
No, Paul, this has been thoroughly enjoyable. So first of all, thanks for having me on here. It's been really exciting to learn about what you're doing at What's Happening with interviewing other GPT creators. And frankly, it's opened up my mind in terms of what the J1 resume bot could be and how it kind of integrates more into some of the broader programming we're doing as well. So I appreciate kind of all you're doing for the community and what you're doing for the Irish community as well. So no, thanks again for having me. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate that. It's funny. We have, we're doing this GPT creator series right now. But the next series that we're thinking about, which is not official just yet, but we're looking at interviewing intentional investors, and that would be investing in niche communities, be it like from underrepresented communities here in the United States, or specific like the Irish Angels Venture Fund, any specific niche areas. I think even we have anyone that invests in there's a Rise of the Rest. It's a Revolution in DC, which is a VC firm that's doing great work across the country. Again, picking random areas outside of Silicon Valley. So we love them. We're trying to power those outside of Silicon Valley to get to the top and compete. And, it's like the next, as I say, this intentional investors is going to target some angel investment groups as well as some VCs that are specifically in niche communities. And as I say, the Digital Irish Venture Fund are a big part of that story. So you heard it here first, Gavin.
More to come.
All righty. Well, Gavin, thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for listening. This has been an episode of What's Happening, series GPT Creators podcast brought to you by my firm, 3 Advance. We are the development team for startups. You can catch this on YouTube. Hopefully you're watching this, or if you're not, you're listening to it on Spotify. The usual places, Amazon Podcasts. And if you haven't already signed up for our newsletter, we do a What's Happening newsletter. That's news and tech and memes. So if you want your news distilled, if you're a non-techie, you want to be able to talk and roll with the tech bros and everybody else that seems to know more than you, check that out. It's a great resource, and it's a little bit of fun too. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.